Hey, hi, everybody. My name is Mike Jacobson. I'm president of Inventors Network here in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome to our August 2021 general meeting. Our topic tonight is prototyping, the purposes of prototyping and modeling, why they are important, how detailed or extensive or expensive need they be. Before I proceed, I've been asked to make this announcement. People have asked us how Inventors Network is organized. And I just want everybody to know that we are a volunteer organization. Nobody is paid any salary. And we are run by a board of about 5 members. It's down to 4 right now. If anybody's interested in helping us distribute our meeting notices, please contact us and let us know. But the 5 of us maintain our website, make changes in our website. We contact speakers. We organize our general meeting. We purchase refreshments. Anything that has anything to do with Inventors Network is done by the 5 of us. And that is our personnel. Just so you know. This meeting is being recorded, so please be careful with your comments. Don't discuss anything which is not protected information. You should turn on your chat window, which is located on the bottom of your screen. You can see the chat. Just click on that, and when that window comes up, you can move it to the side of the screen so it's not in your way. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Sébastien Proulx. He's the Associate Professor of Design and Industrial Design Coordinator at O.S.U, the Ohio State University, College of Arts and Sciences, Department of Design. He is the Associate Professor of Design, Coordinator of the Industrial Design Major, and co-director of the DSIS lab at The Ohio State University. He holds a PhD in design and a Master of Applied Science in Design and Complexity from the University of Montreal in Canada. He completed postdoctoral studies in public health at the University of Montreal Public Health Research Center, IRS-PUM, and a doctoral fellowship in political and moral sociology at the Paris School for Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences, EHES. Before joining Ohio State's Department of Design, Dr. Proulx was a lecturer at the University of Montreal School of Design for 12 years. He taught social service design, problem setting, and visual communication to industrial design students. He is also a recurring visiting professor at the University of Nimes in France, where he teaches within the Design for Social Innovation graduate program. He serves as associate editor of the Francophone peer-reviewed journal, Sciences du Design, PUF. He also remains affiliated as a research associate to the University of Montreal's Design et Société research group. His research program revolves around the role of designers in the development of public services and policies. His approach draws on moral sociology and care ethics to develop an appropriate conceptual framework to provide designers with ways to cope with the complexity of contemporary social and political realities. His research goals are about 1, understanding the designer's role in the socio-political realm. That's the theoretical goal. 2, expanding the horizon of design activities in the development of public services. That's the practical goal. And 3, making designers capable of assuming the responsibilities associated to such a stance. That's the pedagogical goal. In addition to you raising your hand to be called upon, you may use the chat screen, and you can chat with everyone or with somebody in particular. If you're a newcomer, please direct your name and your email address to Greg O'Brien, our host, on the chat window. Thank you, Mr. Proulx. The floor is yours. I'll let you know when you're running out of time. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you, Michael. I didn't expect you to go all of this through all of this long bio. I should have provided you with a shorter one. So thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be having this opportunity to speak with all of you tonight. Fair warning to start. I am not really used to do presentation outside the realm of my typical academic community. So I've tried to pushed away those whole habits, but I am afraid that they will come back sooner than later. So please, if you, whenever you want to address me, address any question at any time, and we could leave the stuffy things out, and please call me Sébastien. So as Michael said, I'm an associate professor at Ohio State University. I lead the industrial design program as the program coordinator. And part of my job is to teach industrial design to our great student. I teach mostly within our industrial design program to our sophomore students. So I get them really early to get them started in the perspective that I like. But most of my work is to be conducted with senior level students, where I lead the capstone project, where students are to develop a project of their own. So in a way, I feel like this probably connects pretty well with what I'm expecting inventors are going through. So tonight I'll be talking about the purposes of prototyping and modeling and why are they important. And I want to emphasize the plural on the purposes. I think the goal really of my talk tonight will be to demonstrate the scope of what prototyping can do, which unfortunately is often reduced to narrow perspective that takes away all of the potential that I feel like prototyping is having. So that will be the core of my talk tonight. And you'll see I make a really long introduction to spend fairly a short amount of time on prototyping per se, but this introduction is really kind of setting the background on how to think about it. So hopefully will all make sense at the end. All right, what's going on? Okay, here we go. So full disclosure, before I go further, two little notice. So I'm expecting that some of you logged in tonight, expecting me to talk a little bit about the latest technology in the realm of prototyping, like those super high-tech 3D printer that can print at full scale car parts and NASA-grade materials. So for those of you who are expecting that, as exciting as this topic could be, I must apologize in advance, as I won't be really talking about that. For one, I am really not knowledgeable about that. I know nothing about additive printing. I already know a little bit, but not all that much, and I can certainly not talk about it in an informed way. But most importantly, I don't want to talk about that because I want to try to make the argument that prototyping is much more than high-end prototyping. That even a simple doodle on a napkin or a rough folded paper can actually have a great impact on product development. So that's my first warning. My second warning, why isn't that thing changing? Oh, there we go. The other thing I won't be talking about are the different ways we can make prototypes. So again, I'm sorry for those who wished that I would be talking about that. But again, I am an academic, so I don't do anything. I think about it. But that being said, there are tons and tons and tons of great resources on that front. So if that is really a topic that would be of interest to you, I can only highly recommend this wonderful book by my colleague Bjarki Algrimsson, who is an associate professor of industrial design at Carleton University in Ottawa, who wrote this book called Prototyping and Model Making for Product Design. It's the second edition. This is the Bible. All design school in the world use that as the book, their go-to places to provide student with insight into how to make prototypes. So you have all of the techniques that are out there and how to use them described in really great detail in this book. I think it's $25 on Amazon. So for any one of you who would be interested in learning more about kind of the technical side of prototyping and the various techniques that are out there to make quick mock-up, I highly suggest this book. So with those two, fair warning, I hope not too many of you are disappointed, and I'll still try to make this talk interesting. So what is it that I want to talk about? If I don't want to talk about high-end 3D printing and technicalities of how do we make prototype, what is it that I want to talk about? Well, I want to talk about prototyping. Why do we prototype? What does it serve? And especially how to think about it. To an extent, prototyping is often understood most of the time as a marketing tool. And this is a really valuable role that prototyping can play. Don't get me wrong. Don't make me say things I am not saying. It's a great asset of prototyping. It's a great way to sell a product. And that is, even more true today, given all of the 3D printing and rapid prototyping strategies that we have that can be done incredibly easily in timely fashion for almost no money. So we can nowadays create really high fidelity prototypes for almost nothing. So that's all great, and so that makes the marketing value of prototyping still really relevant. But there's more to it. There's much more to prototyping as a component of the design process, and that's really what I want to talk about. So prototype is commonly taught as the physical model of a product, useful to demonstrate forms, features, functionings. And so in that perspective, prototypes serves the role of a proof of concept. And you have a few examples of work done by my students a couple of years ago. And to the point I was making, I think she did this really great prototype in a matter of a couple of days for less than $20. And that was, that is something that was not imaginable a few years back. So it really helps. New techniques and new technology are really helping out and supporting the development of great prototype. But when we all saw when the jury saw that this project on our senior thesis, what we were impressed by and about was not so much this final, appearance model, but this prototyping that she went throughout her project, how she leveraged prototyping as a way to get to that point. And those, cardboard cutout, all kind of scrappy a little bit, and sketches were much more insightful. They were much more telling of the process that she went through to explain and make a case for why her design decision were so strong and why the final outcome was, so good. And that is not being conveyed solely by the appearance model that we have at the end, but it translates through all of the prototyping that goes through in the design process. So that's what I want to talk about tonight, trying to make sense of where prototyping can come in and how to leverage it and how to mobilize it as a component of the design process. On a note on this idea of the design process, some of you might not be familiar with the world of design or coming from engineering. I use the design process pretty broadly as the activity of giving form to something. So anything that is man-made is actually design. So I use design here as a verb. So you as inventors, as people who make things, who trying to give form to something, whether it's material or immaterial, are engaging in the design process. So just for clarifying, I don't have a narrow scope or narrow definition of what design is. I have an encompassing one. So feel free to include yourself in being people engaged in the design process the whole time. So where do we go from there? So what I want to suggest here is that prototyping can be understood really differently and be leveraged as a method in very different ways. So I'd like to unpack this concept of prototyping because it's a polysemical concept. You know, it means many different things for a lot of different people. And that's a little unfortunate because it takes away the capacity to really embrace and engage with prototyping. So what I'm going to try to emphasize is that prototyping is a good research and exploration method. And I think what's going to make, the key of my presentation is that prototyping doesn't come at the end. Prototyping can start the minute you start on a new venture. You don't have to wait to have a clear idea of what you want to do to start prototyping. You can start prototyping right away and whipping up stuff. And I will argue that it's often a really good way to start, for as long as you keep a critical mind and that you're not afraid of, putting a lot of things in the trash bin. So part of the reason that explain why we often think about prototyping in a narrow way is that whenever we talk about the design process, we try to present it in a logical way. We try to, because it's such a complex endeavor, we like to create boxes. And one of the great, model that is out there that has a lot of publicity and a lot of people rally around right now is the design thinking process diagram that was coined by the Stanford D School. This model has been going on for a few years now. It's having a lot of dissemination, and in a way, it's a really great model because they identify the key dimension, the key tasks that are central to any design process. And in that design model, they suggest that prototyping is kind of the fourth step. It comes after empathizing, defining the problem and ideation, and then we prototype our ideas. That means that we need to have a clear idea of what we're doing before we start prototyping. And we prototype for the sake of testing and analyzing, so assessing. That's a great model. That's actually the steps that we go through in design. However, and I'll go back to that, I have a certain number of criticism because of this kind of lockstep or structure that they provide to it. So in the Stanford model, prototyping is defined as a way to explore the role of product, the look and feel, or the implementation. And that's a secondary model that was developed by Ud and Hill, who were a designer at Apple. It's kind of old, but it still stands some ground. And it really relates well with the type of this conceptualization of prototyping that is being conveyed through the Stanford model. The thing, as I said, is I just wish it was that easy. If design process was just like that, and my job would be so much easier. I could teach things really simply and over a stack of paper to my student and go back to my job and do some research. So, as I'm sure all of you can imagine, as inventor, whenever you go through, it doesn't go this way. It's so much more complex. So a lot of people have tried to take the Stanford model and make some back and forth arrows trying to show that this model can be iterative, showing that, it's a little bit more convoluted, but still it doesn't add up. So whenever I talk about the design process, I am much rather, I like to refer to this model that was whipped up by my own mentors a few years back. His name is Alain Findeli. He's a world-renowned design scholar. And he whipped up that model a few years ago because he was tired of everybody trying to create these logical steps trying to explain design in a way that was unrealistic. So, for Alain, the design process is this big, messy process. We have an input and we have an output, and in the middle, it's a big mess. That doesn't mean that it's going all over the place, and it should not be think rationally or logically, but we just need to accept that it's much more messy. It goes back and forth, and things are not structured. And for as long as we can deal with that, then we are more likely to be successful in our design process and really lead and develop product that makes sense. So this leaves the question of, well, where does prototyping happen in such a model? So if it's no longer a lockstep and it's all a big mess, where and why do I prototype? Well, it happens all over the place. And that's really the key. Prototyping can be called upon at really different time from the get-go and from very different reason or different purposes. And when we start thinking about it this way, we have much more different ways to engage with prototyping. So the tasks that the Stanford model brought up are still relevant, but the relationship that we identify between those steps can be taught really differently. So when we talk about empathizing, for instance, which is the first step of the Stanford model, if I go back to it here, you see in the blue, the first step is called empathize. That means understand the reality, the social reality, the reality of user or whatever. So it's about empathizing. Well, empathizing doesn't happen by magic. Prototyping can actually be a really good way to start empathizing with people, because we can whip up something, give it and put it in their hand and start learning. And from there, understand who and what's going on. So when we start thinking of design this way, understanding that they are different tasks, but that they are not bound to the logical step that they are usually presented. Those models are being whipped up by a project manager or project management scholar to try to explain what's going on in the R&D department of many firms, with designers and engineers that always go above and beyond budget and timeline. So when we start thinking about it in such a messy process, we have an opportunity to rethink the role prototyping may have and rethink how to engage with it. So this is a say that I always bring to my students, is starting to prototype. A prototype and a baseball bat to smash it is a really great way to start any project. Nowadays, we teach design students to think about what they do and do a lot of research. And all of that is really great. We want them to be smart. We want them to speak with authority about, whatever they're working on. The problem with that is that they engage in research aimlessly. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're searching for. So that makes them feel completely overwhelmed. And again, I can surely imagine that many of you trying to invent something, when you start designing or, we start thinking about something, you don't really know where to go. So prototyping is actually a really good way to start. Just whip up something and then take a baseball bat and smash it to identify where are the holes, where are the gaps, where are the things that don't work in our conceptions of what's going on, or our perception of what the reality is, so that we can engage and embrace the next step of the design process in a much more structured and logical way. So this whole phenomenon has been explained by a architecture scholar named Jane Dark in 1971. She wrote a really, really important paper, and through which she presented the concept of primary generator. So a primary generator, it's a term that she used to characterize this little idea that we all have in our head anytime we start a project. I'm sure all of you, at any time that you're starting on something, you had a flash or you have a certain idea of what could be done. That phenomenon is called a primary generator. And that's a really great thing, but it can also be a really bad thing. We have to know how to play with it and leverage it in order to be able to be successful and go beyond our primary generator. So primary generator are actually rooted in all of the kind of implicit knowledge that we have acquired personally through experience of doing at a project or our personal lives. All of these ideas that we have whenever we're presented with an opportunity are going to help us forge this primary generator. The reality is that it's full of gap, and it's also based on a lot of assertion. So we make up stuff, or we think it's this way. There's no, we don't have enough evidence to actually say that this is true. So primary generator are a really good thing because they allow us to acknowledge that, but to do so, it's really difficult. We have to put it on paper. We have to prototype it. So one thing that we always say to our students is, this primary generator, just prototype it with, take an hour and do it. And, what they discover is that it never works because in their head, things are kind of really well polished. They all fits in together. But in reality, then they identified so many gaps. And that is great because now they know what to do. They know that, okay, I don't have information about this, or this is stuff that I'm completely making up that has no grounding. I need to look into that much, much further. Or this mechanism that I was thinking, that kind of goes against the laws of physics. So that's not going to work. So those primary generators are there, and they can be useful for as long as we can embrace them. If we don't do that, what happens is it's trigger what we call a fixation effect. So what happens most of the time when this primary generator is not fully expressed or it's not put on paper, we're going to keep it in the background of our mind. And whatever we continue, we're still going to try to make these new ideas that we have fit this primary generator. And it's denying us this capacity of elevating or looking beyond, those kind of out of the bat ideas that we have. So you see, when we think about it this way, prototyping doesn't have to serve the proof of concept purposes or the marketing purposes that we typically associate with it. In such a case, prototyping become a component of the design process to help us elevate and look further and continue our inquiry toward a successful product development. So in such a perspective, it means that prototyping is to be understood as an empirical and experimental strategy that can support design endeavors in various ways. And the plural is here important. However, to be effective and to spend our resources wisely, and resources here is to be understood in various forms of capital, from financial to time to cognitive load. These are all resources that we need to invest, but we all have limits on resources, so we have to think wisely and effectively about how we engage with prototyping, and therefore we need to understand the specific functions that prototyping may serve at a given moment of the design process. If you recall, if we go here, you see those red dots that represent where the prototyping can be. They're all different. And so the strategy and the way to engage with prototyping will be different. And it's important that we think about it with enough precision and details so that we engage and use prototyping wisely and we don't waste resources. So the nature, the focus, and the effort put in prototyping has to be taught in accordance with what the project is calling for. So if we're at the beginning, we're looking for certain things, For the end, well, it's a different matter. So it's important that we think strategically about what prototyping is and what's the aim. So model, on that front, that explain what prototyping do are plentiful, and I'm showing two here. But to be honest, I think I had preparing this talk, I had 80 different little models like that explain prototyping in many different ways. A lot of scholars and a lot of researcher in design are actually looking into the development and what prototyping is. Those two are kind of interesting. The one at the top brought up new vocabulary of proto-think, proto-learn, proto-test, and I thought it was quite clever way of thinking about it and its relationship with pilot probes and prototype, or model below, do a correlation between the granularity of your prototype and the progress or evidence for success that it's aiming to do. So you have a really fine-grained prototype. It's meant really as a way to, it comes in really late in when you have a lot of progress done, but at the early onset of a project, you're going to try to keep it broadly defined, and that's normal. So that's models like that to talk about prototyping are plentiful. And are quite interesting and insightful about to help us think about what prototyping can do. So the spectrum of role. So what I'd like to do now is to present you a spectrum of role that prototype and the process of prototyping can play during the design process, especially as a kind of a research. It's called that research, but it's more of a support for investigation and inquiry. However, because I'm not that smart, I will refer myself to the work of two of my European colleagues, Thomas Bensveen and Ben Matthews, who produced and wrote a really good book chapter. I think it was in 2014, and it's still relevant today. So it's getting old, but honestly, I haven't read anything more current than that. It's still the paper I use and that we make our student use. It's the most current thing and the most interesting to date. And they did a fantastic job about synthesizing and clarifying different role for prototyping, and this is what I'd like to kind of focus on and bring to your attention this evening. So the role of prototyping, according to Bensveen and Matthews, are fourfold. They can think about it as experimental component, as mean of inquiry, as research archetype, and finally as a driver for research direction. So in a way, it may look like these things are kind of one and the same, or they overlap a lot, which is true to an extent, but they also have a lot of nuance between them. And I think this is what is important. As I said earlier, if we want to invest our effort and our resources wisely in prototyping, it's important that we understand the nuance in the type of prototyping that we can engage, so that we can maximize return on investment, or the impact that the prototyping will have on the project development. So those four roles can be divided in two different categories. So I thought about, how am I going to present them to you tonight? Would it be better to present, which category would be better to present first? At the end of the day, I decided to go with this strategy, which is first to describe the first three roles, which are really function of prototyping in the design process. And use the fourth one, which is driver of prototyping, as a driver for research direction, as kind of vehicle, or describe it as a vehicle for inquiry. So what's the process of prototyping means? So, let's go into the details of these four roles. All right. So the first one, and I think that's probably the most common one, is to consider prototype as experimental component. So in such a perspective, the goal is to create a prototype and use prototyping to create something that will help us test a specific hypothesis. So that's really the typical, that's kind of the proof of concept type of approach. So in such a case, we come up, the way to do and engage with this form of prototyping is to create a set of specific variation of a prototype or a concept of use. So we're going to create a number of different prototype, and then we're going to try to see which one works best, which one meets our list of criteria. So the type of question that we ask using this type of prototyping are things like, does X do Y? So if I do this, will it actually do what I'm expecting it to do? Or we could also engage in this form of prototyping as a way to compare and contrast which one is the best way to do something. So out of A, B, C, which one will most efficiently or most successfully meet the criteria that we have established? So this is really a way to get going and gather specific information, really technical information that can be quantifiable in nature. So when we engage with such kind of prototyping, what we're looking and what we're going to be focusing on are things like appearance. So what shape works best? What size is proportion okay? Is it is the color right, or is it is this the good red, or is it one of the 20,000 more reds hue of red or shades of red that are out there that would be more efficient? So it's really where we test it out. We test an hypothesis. We can test functionality, and we can focus on functionality. That means the engineering side of things, the back end of things, technical conformity, and things like that, materials. And we can also focus on interactivity, or what I call the use of something. So, all right, I'm designing a chair. How are people going to use it? Or I'm designing a microwave. Are people able to use, all of the buttons, yes or no, and use it in a way that is smart? That's where we test it. That's this type of prototyping. So the takeaway when we engage with such such a form of prototyping are objective information, primarily quantifiable. So that means it's pretty much black and white. When you set up your experiment, you set it up so that you can gather information that is going to be clear, concise, and precise, so that you know how to move forward. It's really a kind of a way to test specific thing. And the clearer you are, the best it will be, because you'll have information that have clear meaning. The second type of prototype, this one is maybe a little bit more obscure to some of you, especially as this is something that is currently developing, that's been developing maybe for the past 30 to 40 years in design theory, is to consider prototype as a mean of inquiry. So in such a context, the role and the purpose of prototyping is open-ended exploration. That means we use prototype to figure out what's going on. We have a lot of questions with no answer, and we prototype stuff to make people react, to test it out and see what comes of it. There's no clear aims. That's really not the goal. The goal is really heuristic in a way. We want to generate knowledge or gather new information that we are not suspecting. and it's incredibly effective. So in such a concept, prototypes will ask or will, take the form of probes that will allow to collect information about a phenomenon. Methods to do this, for instance, are what we call prototype or martyr concept. In a way, it's just we're creating weird stuff, completely out of the blue or completely out of left field, and we put it in people's hand and we see how they react. That is proving to be incredibly amazing, especially when you're doing something for a specific target group, because when you ask people what they want, they have an hard time telling you what they want. They don't know what they want because they don't know what's possible. But what people are really good at is telling us what they don't want. And there's so much information that we can gather through that by forcing them or putting them in situation like, I never want that. And then you just dig a little bit, says why. And it's such an insightful way to gather information that would not be available otherwise. And prototyping here is key because you cannot just talk with people. It's incredibly difficult to express ideas about things we don't know. But if you put something in their hand and you make them react, then word comes easy. So as a mean of inquiry, prototype is this form of prototyping is a way to focus on context, people's experience, and some cultural and social norms that are often so embedded, so implicit that we forgot that they are there, but they can always be questioned. And so the takeaway for anyone who engage with this form of prototyping will getting access to things like perceptions, qualitative information, and a thing that I like a lot, threshold. Up to where can I go? What's the line that I cannot cross? So, the type of question that we ask when this form of prototyping is something like, what happened when X is put in X context? So let's introduce something new and see what it generates. And if it doesn't lead to anything, that's fine. But we engage with such form of prototyping when we are unsure, when we have, gaps or uncertainties about certain things. So we can have a hint about where we're going, but we're not sure. So this form of prototyping is a way to really kind of engage and gather information in a structured and efficient way. Third role that prototypes can play is a prototype as a research archetype. And in a way we can think about it. This role is a little tricky because it kind of overlaps with the first one, but there's a nuance to it, and nuance is important. And as a research archetype, the role of the prototype is really the one of a proof of concept, an illustration, or a demonstration. As inventor, I can imagine that you guys have figured out, new innovation of, hey, we can do it this way, we'd be more efficient, but we still need to demonstrate that. And so here the prototype serves an archetype, an illustration, or a proof of concept that something is possible. And at the top here, you have a chair that was designed by what's his name? Antoni Dunny and Fiona Raby, who are designers at the Royal College of Art in England. And that specific chair is in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And it's an expression of, how people can then live without an enclosed space. And we always, they were challenging a vision that we can live in a really, really tight space. Something that was not available, and they demonstrated that there's ways around that. So in a way, it's kind of a really far-fetched concept, but it's still an interesting approach and project because it's a physical embodiment of a concept or an idea, and it demonstrates feasibility and relevance. So such form of prototyping goal is really this notion of having proof, learning design lesson, demonstrating potentialities, or elucidate a certain research contribution. So if you've done something, you've come up with an idea, it's a way to elucidate it. So all of these three forms or role that prototyping can play help us understand this fourth role, which is slightly different in nature, because we're no longer talking about prototypes, but here we're talking about prototyping, the action of making a prototype. And in such a perspective, prototyping is becoming a driver for research direction. We can think about it as a way to help us know where to go, how to gather information, and coming to know what's in front of us. And so how do we do that? How do we get to engage with prototyping in such a perspective? Well, for me, there's two key dimensions. We need to make stuff. We have to wait. You stop waiting about thinking about things. We just need to make it. But that also comes with critical thinking. We have to be able to trash and smash things with a baseball bat and say, this is not good. And what happens when we don't do that is that we can look into and we can focus on unknowns, uncertainties, things that are unexpected. And what comes out of it is knowledge, which is the key to create any good product. We need knowledge so that we can refine it. A lot of products, there's always a product for that out there. What we tend to focus on are details that will really make or will really elevate something to a new height, that will help innovate, not necessarily in an iterative way, but sometimes in a really transformative way. But for that, we need knowledge. And I believe prototyping is probably the best tool out there to get to that point. And so I have a question here. Before I conclude, do you ever need outside ideas, subject opportunities for your student? Oh yeah, okay. We can talk about that later. But yes, absolutely. We always welcome outside prompts as a way to get our students started. I'd be happy to connect with you on that. So quick conclusion, because I think my time is pretty much up. Prototyping, and if that's one takeaway, from the conceptual presentation that I made to you tonight, is prototyping is a really good way to fail. It's a really good way to know what's not working. It's a good way to show proof of concept, but it's also a really good way to fail. And failure, in a way, is the best possible way to develop a project, because when you fail, you know what to do next. It's whenever you go and we do confirmation testing, and then you test something and then it doesn't break. Okay, what's next? I don't know. It was successful, but I'm still not happy. It's still not there. When it breaks or when it fails, I know exactly what to do. I have all of the information in my hands. So prototypes are an excellent vector of failure when understood as research methodology or as ways to support project development. So I often like to use, and part of my research is about diagnosis. And for me, prototyping is an effective strategy for diagnosis purposes. I'll make an analogy with the medical world, in a world in which the concept of diagnosis is much more common than it is in design and engineering. Maybe some of you know the show Dr. House. It was on TV probably 10 years ago. It's a show in which a doctor and his fellow are presented with, really puzzling medical situation that people had. And what they were engaging in, it's prototyping. They were whipping up course of treatment, trying to see if, it would stand their prognosis. They were making a prototype, and then it failed. And then they knew that, okay, well, we can discard lupus. It was never lupus. It was probably something else. And so prototyping is just an amazing way to help us understand and put the finger on what's not working. And then once we know that, once we've captured that, then we can move forward. So I hope this presentation was interesting, and I will welcome any question if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Proulx. Everybody, the floor is open for the next 15 minutes. Anything you'd like to ask Dr. Proulx about what he's spoken about tonight, or anything you'd like to ask him about prototyping in general. The floor is open for any questions. Jamie, I think you had a question. Did he address it? Dr. Proulx, do you see any questions in the chat?
I see someone asking if we can visit the DESIS lab. The DESIS lab is more a conceptual space than a physical space. It's more of a place where a number of researchers here works on. That being said, we are installing a new lab that is going to be called the DPP lab, this one is a physical lab. It's called the Digital Public Participation Lab. It's going to be set up in Dominion Middle School on Arcadia Avenue. They moved that school. And so we have 2,000 square feet, and we are installing a new virtual reality system that doesn't require a headset to do public participation event and co-design effort to help community group develop project together. And this will be this should be set up soon, but COVID has been delaying us because we can't access the premises because of the sanitary restriction. So if anybody is interested, that would certainly be something that we could show you around, or it could even be put. We're going to make that lab available to the community of Columbus. So it's not for us to run project. It will be an open service for Columbus community members to come in and engage in design activities. So the DESIS lab cannot be visited, but the DPP lab will be open, hopefully in the next few months.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
I was always under the impression that if I establish a prototype, then I could take it to trade shows, or I could take it to Walmart and perhaps take it to the next level as far as getting it on the market or getting it in retail stores, or just getting it, to fruition. Is that a possibility? And also, students, I mean, I don't know what a prototype besides what you said with the bat, but is that something that your students would do as far as assisting with a prototype as well?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you. Your sound was choppy. Would you mind? So I got the first part of the question about prototype as marketing tool that I got, and I will answer. But the second part about what the students, that I didn't get. Would you mind repeating that?
Student or colleagues would actually help create a prototype. I don't know how to go about a prototype. So to actually get a prototype established, is that something that could be done by any of the students?
No, that's we're teaching college students, so they're being provided with project that we come up with or we establish with external partner that have pedagogical goals. So that being said, we have student orgs. There might be ways for you to seek out through our student org if some students would be interested in prototyping. Some of them like to do that. So I would imagine that some students would be interested in doing that. And to your first question, yes, as I said early in the presentation, prototypes are a really good way as a proof of concept or as marketing tool to help get people buy-in. And that is kind of the typical understanding that we have of prototyping, or the role that we associate with it. So that is certainly still valid, and it's something that can be done. My goal tonight was to show you that prototype doesn't need to be that sophisticated. It can also be, and it can serve different purposes in the process of creating something. And to be frank, when I was in professional practice for the short time that I was, because I was bored, most of the product and the things that we were presenting to client were, really, really simple. We were making it, out of paper, and that was good enough, for as long as you have a rationale and, a business model behind things, and a number of things that will help support the logic behind the product you create. The prototype doesn't do everything, and it's not always necessary to have, extremely high end or high fidelity prototype. That being said, the beauty today is 3D printers are available for free in about any public library out there, and there's always someone online that would be willing to CAD something. So we get to prototype kind of those marketing approach pretty fairly easily.
Thank you.
I got a question.
Yes.
This is Mike Strang. At what point in your class with your students do you pull the plug on them?
When they call student services complaining about mental health problem.
Not every great idea is a great idea. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get what you say. We are in an academic setting, and so what we try to teach the student is to, and we give the students all the liberty to fail. I don't care. I don't grade the final outcome of any project. I don't even look at it. I don't care. What I care about is the process they went through and how they made their decision. How did they evolve? How did they flip things around? So our approach with our students is to force them a little bit in following through with their ideas, because they have this tendency of, oh yeah, we have a small hurdle, it doesn't work, and they move on to something else. But a hurdle can be overcome in 20,000 ways. So we have this approach, because we don't have that much time, to still force them and have them kind of take a leap of faith, try it out nonetheless, help, push forward, continue with your ideas. And even if at the end of the day it doesn't work, just tell me why it's not working, and I'll be happy with that. The issue is that if we don't do that, they have this tendency of just jumping from one thing to another, and they don't build off and they don't confront their own ideas. So yes, sometimes, when they're really kind of going in the wrong direction, we'll suggest that they pivot things, but it doesn't happen all that often. They usually kind of pretty much nailed it. And there's always something fruitful. Doesn't mean that it will turn into something great, but they always have an hunch, and they do enough research so that they know that their direction is good, but we push them to follow through, even if it doesn't end up being something that is viable.
So the object can be the way. In other words, what the object, the hurdle, whatever, can be the way to progress through to another step, to another method, another methodology. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. Exactly that. They make something, and they see it doesn't work. It will never work, but they can tell why. And so if we had more time, we could fix that.
Sure.
But academia is our semester are 15 weeks long, and I meet with students at really small number of hour a week, so we can only do so much. My goal, my job is to train them when they're going to have time later in the future. So what I want to have, I'm there to train their mind and have them think about how to do that. And so whenever they do it for real, or they have a real commission, or they are inventing something, they know the process and they can carry it on their own.
Yeah, I've got to say the process. I guess I've had the mindset that the prototype comes so much later, after drawings, after methods, research, etc. But you've given me a new directive with try it, build this, do that, put it together with popsicle sticks, tape, glue, whatever, and play with it. That didn't work. Okay, why? Let's move on. So yeah, I've definitely gotten a new view to things. That's very helpful.
It's while I'm a theoretician, what I'm always conveying is that stop the theory, just try it out, and because that's really where you learn. You need to be pragmatic, and you'll see it right away. Oh man, this is this never going to work. It's going to this is completely the wrong track, because it works on paper. It works in your head. But there's a thing. I often think I had the students a few years ago. She designed something to help aging population climb the stair. And at one point, I keep telling him, you need to prototype this, because there's a thing called physics, and you can't get around that. And he was, he didn't want to. He kept sketching it. He kept sketching it, but he never prototyped it. And at the end of the day, it's just like, dude, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And he had a really bad grade, not because of the bad outcome. I didn't care. As I said, I don't care about that. I really don't care about the outcome. What I care is that he didn't try it out. He failed in his design process. So he set himself up for failure, not because so that's really what matters. And prototyping here is really to be understood as one of the methods that is out there that we can have in our toolbox to create good product that will make sense, and that can survive the test of reality.
Yeah, it's huge.
I have a couple questions in the chat. Thank you for your response. Yes, we have our O.S.U students present every year. We have two public-facing events mostly. One is in the fall. It's our winter market. So it's our third-year students that create product that are mostly houseware product. They're always amazing, and I have a couple examples here. It's a sustainable market. So students have to create a product, serialize it in small batch, so about 10 to 15 run, and they have to sell it in our winter market. So this is a product that was created out of plastic bag and milk jug. It's a cutting board that the students created in an oven. They made 10 of this. They were on sale for $20. They sold in 5 minutes. This is a bag for cyclists so that they can have their U-lock in a really comfortable way. And then all of this was made with recycled kind of posters. So every year we do that. So that's a public facing. It usually happens at the end of November, after Thanksgiving. So just go and like the O.S.U Facebook page, and it's advertised there. There's always awesome product, but you have to be there really early because everything sells in half an hour. And so we try to, it's meant to be a Christmas market. So there a bunch of really interesting product to buy for gift. That's actually where I do all my shopping, so I don't have to care for it anymore. And the second public facing event that we have, this one is in the spring. we have the what we call the senior show. So that is happening at the Urban Art Space in downtown Columbus, which is a gallery space that is owned by O.S.U. I don't know the dates for this year, so it's usually end of March, beginning of April. It spreads over a week, and so all of the senior and graduating class of the year will be presenting. The Department of Design has three majors, so that is industrial design, visual communication design, and interior design. So all three major are presenting, as well as our grad student. And so, yeah, they will be presenting that, and that is a public event that is open to anyone. Have any of the students' project led to great product? And if so, does O.S.U support Path Forward? This is where Columbus Inventor Networks helps. So they've created a lot of things that are really interesting that could have potential, but because we work within kind of tight time frame, they're still not there yet. I feel like every year there's missed opportunities. There's a lot of great product that have the potential of being turned into great business venture or great invention. Unfortunately, students often don't follow through because they get a job and they move on to other things. I wish they had more the entrepreneurial fiber, and then they would continue with that. Not a lot of them do. Ohio State is supporting them to an extent through TCO. So we have an Office of Commercialization, but it's extremely, Ohio State is the country of red tape, or what we call scarlet tape. There's so many rules and regulation, and you have to let go of so many of the royalty and stuff like that for students it becomes kind of too much. And TCO mostly take on really kind of big project or biotech that will turn into $1 billion venture in a matter of a couple of years. So often industrial design project, they have potential, but not necessarily to the scope of a new vaccine that's going to be developed in the med center and stuff like that. So TCO is not always kind of super keen on what we do. So yeah, I would certainly share the existence of the Inventor Network with the students. I think maybe a few of them would be interested in joining and getting support to elevate some of their project. And we are following you on Twitter and LinkedIn. Will you mention those events on those platforms? Yes, we typically share on LinkedIn and Twitter. To my knowledge, I am not an expert on that, so I don't know where. So I know we're mostly active on Instagram and Facebook because that's where students are. We use that as a way to recruit. But we're getting a communication person this year, so I'll ask her that she share the events on make sure that she shares the event on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Okay, we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Proulx. Your passion and your interest in research has opened my eyes about prototyping. We have a certificate for you. Can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be sending that to you at your office address. Everybody, the next topic is for September is going to be naming my invention for success. Should be another interesting presentation. A week from tonight, everybody, we will be meeting in person at the Rusty Bucket in Hilliard, Ohio. That address is 3901 Britton, Britton Parkway. And we're looking forward to seeing you there. Until we meet again, invent and prosper.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Mike. Nice meeting.